Welcome to Peculiar Tales. I'm your host, KMS. Automatanophobia, a large word, but in terms of our story today, it refers to the fear of mannequins and dummies. I personally believe that this is a fear everyone has, but for some, it depends on what the mannequin in question looks like and how it acts. Today's tale involves none other than a mannequin, or at least what seems to be one, who I'm sure would get anyone's hackles up, especially when it turns out that it seems to be doing a little more than nothing like it should be. This is A Mannequin in the Morning. We all have those stories, the ones that seem too strange to be real. The ones we keep to ourselves, lock inside our head, try to forget about, because mentioning them to someone else just makes you sound absolutely insane. Well, like I said, I think everyone has one. The world is a lot stranger, weirder, and more supernatural than we like to imagine. So let's open things up, get to the truth, the real reality of the world we live in. I'll start with my story. This was a few years back. Well, more than a few now. Damn, I feel old. I was working overnights at a gas station. It was a terrible job, but times were tough. At least because it was overnight, there were less people to deal with, but all the people that did come in were very strange, to say the least. The night shift, equally dull and terrifying, doubly exhausting. You may think that my story is set during one of these night shifts, but actually, it all began in the mornings when I got off. I didn't have a car at the time, or I guess I did, but it had broken down and I didn't have the money to fix it. Luckily, the gas station I worked at was in the same neighborhood as where I lived. I would just have to pass through the sketchy part of town, even sketchier than the area where my apartment was located. No street was better than the others. They were all lined with rundown, dilapidated, sagging homes. The families living there were only able to continue living there due to generation upon generation passing the same house down. Or the second option was just packing in way too many roommates in one place. No matter their initial situation, neither group could afford much beyond that, allowing the homes to get worse and worse with every year that passed. Now, I'll start by saying I have nothing against generational homes, historical homes, large families, but this area, well, people were just off, weird, maybe on drugs, maybe just crazy. I'm not positive on that because I tried my best to avoid talking with them. About the only time I ever did was when I was forced to at the gas station during my shifts. Anyways, a common theme among these houses was the fact that their yards were filled with junk, not cool, interesting collections or fun yard decorations, but genuine junk. Maybe at one time it wasn't, but after years of rotting outside, it was. I first started the job during the winter, so when I got off in the morning, it was still dark. All I could really see were the silhouettes cast by these crippled homes and piles of refuse, and on occasion, a slightly more illuminated view of the outdated street lamps above. I was always on edge because it was so dark. It always felt like someone was watching me. It was uncomfortable, to say the least, and tense when I began to wonder why. Even though this feeling always persisted, I never really saw anyone. Maybe the occasional solo walker or extremely early morning riser out on the porch for a smoke and coffee, but no one watching with malicious intent. I always walked home fast because of this anyways. Well, that and the cold. Once the season started shifting into spring, though, I became more relaxed, even though I was still being watched. There was enough light from the rising sun that I could see my surroundings, and the mornings weren't quite as bone-chillingly cold as they were before. In a way, I began to enjoy these walks. It was a nice way to shake off the long nights of work, to move my mindset away from that hell and into something a bit more tolerable. With more and more light and less cold and tense moments, my eyes began to move around more rather than focus on the sidewalk in front of me and the goal of getting home. Like I said, most of what I saw was junk, but on occasion, little things would catch my eye. And I especially appreciated the spurts of green growth and budding flowers beginning to appear, changing by the day. There was one home I passed by near the end of the walk, with a particularly large accumulation of junk, so much so that I never paid much attention to the roofed-in porch. My eyes just so happened to pass over it one day, and what I saw made me freeze up as a shockwave of fear rushed through my body, along with the blood from my pounding heart. I saw what I thought was the horribly disfigured, ancient face of someone sitting absolutely still in a rocking chair. My second thought was wondering why this person remained so still. Did they not want me to notice them, or had I frightened them too? Finally, it hit me, and I had to chuckle. It was a mannequin, but an incredibly creepy one at that. Its face looked as though it was originally painted a porcelain white, but had darkened and yellowed over who knows how many years to make it look somewhat more like a tan skin color. The lips, turned upwards in a soft smile, were probably once vibrant too, but were now an off pink color. The eyes were glassy and dark, but well hidden beneath a cap and some tufty bangs of tangled black. It wore a plaid undershirt, a torn and frayed overcoat, and a pair of ancient jeans, more dirty brown than blue. My first thought was that perhaps it was a leftover decoration from Halloween, but then I remembered it was spring, not as if people didn't leave Christmas decorations out year-round out of laziness, though. The second option was that it was just there to be there, another piece of junk in Crazy Town. I shrugged it off and continued on my way, laughing internally at myself for the panic that struck me upon seeing a simple dummy. Although the mannequin had quite the creepy aesthetic about it, almost an aura surrounding it really, I figured it was just part of the initial shock and the thing itself was harmless. At least, that's what I told myself. That started becoming harder and harder to believe as the days passed. For the first couple of days after, I'd honestly more or less forgotten about the thing. I was either lost in thought or not looking in the right direction whenever I passed the old, sagging, junk-filled home and didn't notice it. The next day, though, well, it wasn't the same kind of sudden shock I'd experienced on the first encounter. This one was much deeper, a feeling that penetrates deep into your body and slowly creeps inside to out as your mind runs wild. Well, it had moved positions. Rather than looking out onto the street or perhaps the houses across from its own, the mannequin was now facing down the sidewalk, its chair and body turned perfectly, as if to watch me walk all the way down the sidewalk on my normal route. And upon approaching the house, our eyes, or mine and its dark, beady marbles, would meet as I approached the house. That wasn't even the part that got me going, though. After the initial jolt of noticing the change of position, I realized that its appearance had changed as well. The face was cleaner, paler. Not as baked by the sun, its cheeks had a shade of light red blush in a circular pattern, almost like stage makeup. The lips seemed brighter, more vibrant, and the strangest part of all was that soft smile seemed larger, much larger than I remembered. So wide and stretched that if the thing had teeth, they were about to pop out in a grin. The hair was still messy and mangled, the outfit still tattered, but the mannequin itself seemed so much more, well, alive. I quickened my pace and walked on, that penetrating fear making every inch of my body tingle unpleasantly. I felt off, anxious, nervous. I wondered if it was some kind of joke the homeowners were playing, some way to get into my head. I wouldn't put it past them, even though I didn't know them, had never even seen them. Perhaps it would be something to laugh over in the end. My second explanation was also reasonable, maybe even more so. I began to think that the mannequin was not just there as junk after all, but some sort of prized or sentimental object to whoever dwelled in the house. They had decided it was time to clean it up, repaint it, make it look a little bit nicer, and in the process ended up moving it as well. I just wondered why they wouldn't change the clothes, give the thing a different wig. Had they saved that for another day? At least that had gotten me more curious, but still the next day when I turned the corner and began heading down the street, I hesitated, wondering if I should take a different route. I was ready to be home though, and any other route would add 5 more minutes, maybe 10. It may not seem like much, but after an exhausting, seemingly never-ending night shift in hell, well, it was everything. So with what soon became regret, I pushed ahead. As I approached the home, I squinted into the shadowed depths of the porch, still untouched by the morning light. It took a moment for my eyes to adjust, but I realized that the wicker rocking chair was empty, all but for a small, worn-out pillow, which looked to be used as a cushion for the back. My sigh of relief transformed into a shaky curse beneath my breath as I realized I had been looking in the wrong place the whole time. At the top of the crumbling brick steps leading up to the porch, layered over with a casing of cement, that too falling away, revealing the ancient brick layer, were 2 legs and a familiar pair of ragged, weathered jeans and boots, one crossed over the other. The body they were attached to was hidden behind the brick pillar from which what was left of the handrail for the steps began. I almost didn't want to look as I passed by. The legs were enough to know what I was getting myself into, but I just had to, both out of morbid curiosity and perhaps instinctually, if I needed to protect myself from the hopefully still inanimate object. The blush on the cheeks and the color of the lips were both a deeper, more vibrant red. The face was seemingly back to its original porcelain white color, almost verging on the look of a clown's face paint. The eyes were still deep, dark pinpoints that stood out, or maybe a better description would be sunk in from the rest of the face. The grin had grown wider, and right in its center, I could see the slightly wider color of what was meant to be exposed teeth. After a few quick glances, I hurried along. As I passed by, I thought I heard the soft clack of heavy plastic. I turned back and let out a gasp, my heart nearly jumping up through my throat. It had somehow turned, and it looked right at me from beneath the spindly black strands of hair. I rushed home, even more quickly than the previous day, trying to tell myself it was all in my imagination. My fear from its look, the unsettling vibes that permeated off of it, had gotten the best of me, or maybe, hopefully, it was some kind of sick joke after all. From that point on, I started avoiding the street the mannequin was on altogether, by at least another street or 2, just to be safe. It did add on the minutes to my walk, but it was getting nicer by the day, so in a way it was good to be outside in the fresh, warm air for longer. Slowly, the fear, the anxiety that surrounded the street, my experiences on it began to dissipate. And my mind started to move on to other things, allowing me to appreciate those walks even more. Well, unless my mind was on work or something else to worry about. Then it was a few weeks later that something came over me. I don't even know how to describe it, an urge, but what kind and for what? I'm still not quite sure. I don't know if I wanted to be brave and simply face my fears head on, or had the adventurous urge to see the story through to the end, or perhaps I was missing the thrill and macabre sensation of the experience and craving more. But after almost passing by the street on my way home from the gas station, I came to a halt. I stared down the street for some time, feeling a pull that I'm sure I could have simply walked away from, but gave into too easily. After many hesitant steps forward, then back again, then some pacing back and forth, I headed down the street. The dread and anxiety built up with each step I took. I kept telling myself it was all for nothing. I'd get to the house and nothing strange would happen. The creepy mannequin would still be there, but that's it. It was just a mannequin, nothing more. As I got closer, the sight before me almost made me turn around and head the other way, or at least crossed the other side of the street. I paused for a moment, considering both and eyeballing the situation. The mannequin sat at the edge of the bottom step, its head turned in my direction. Even though the morning sun beamed down against it, the mannequin had a dark aura surrounding it, or at least it felt that way. Out of that aura, its bright cheeks and lips almost glowed, and its mouth was now stretched wide open into a full grin, white teeth painted in. Its hands sat down pleasantly crossed in its lap, and its legs were somewhat splayed out in a relaxed manner. I could have easily crossed the street while technically facing my fears and passing it, but I felt as though I needed to be close. That and there were people further up the street looking my way, and not wanting to seem a fool or baby, I couldn't just cross the street because of some spooky mannequin. So I took in a couple of deep breaths to calm myself and pushed ahead. I began to believe my decision was the correct one as I started to pass by with no issues. But about halfway through, just as the mannequin left my peripherals, it lunged back into them as it fell forward, and I felt what seemed to be its warm, sun-baked hand wrapping around my upper arm in a painfully tight grip, before releasing as I shook violently and stumbled away. The people down the street watched in confusion or amusement, maybe both, as I rushed away while looking back over my shoulder, leaving the mannequin laying face down on the sidewalk, its grin stretching all the way up to its ears, the white teeth glowing from behind the dark, tangled strands of hair, seemingly even whiter than when I'd passed by it. At that point, all I cared about was getting away, though, not what anyone thought. After that last encounter, I was good. That urge never returned, and I never passed anywhere near that street again. In fact, I dreaded going down any of the streets in that neighborhood, expecting something similar to happen. Let's just say it wasn't long until I left the job and moved away, all because of that mannequin. I'm not sure whether it was my mind playing tricks on me, combined with a series of coincidences that fed my fears further, an extremely elaborate prank set up just for me by someone or multiple people I didn't even know that took place over a series of weeks, or if there was something more to it, and that mannequin is truly something to fear, something beyond our understanding, outside of the everyday world we so desperately cling to. I do know that it opened my eyes and my mind. To me, at least, there seems to still be a lot about this place, about our reality, our existence, that we don't fully understand. And I find it funny how, just as I did and continue to do for the most part today, we try to ignore it, forget about it, but things like this go away. And although I don't have that exact urge to go see the mannequin again, a similar urge does come over me on occasion to discover more about this unknown side of reality. That was a mannequin in the morning, and this is Peculiar Tales. I hope you enjoyed the story. If you did, please consider hitting the subscribe button below, leaving a like, and clicking the bell to be notified when the next peculiar tale in my collection is released. Have you ever had an encounter with an unsettling mannequin, or, in general, any situation that bends your perception of reality? Let us know. If you'd like to download this tale and others, click the Bandcamp link in the description below. It's free to download, but donations are greatly appreciated. You can also donate directly to Peculiar Tales through the links found in the description below. Thank you for joining me. I hope to see you next time.